Hi, everyone. How are you? Happy Thursday. Hope you're having a great week. Super sunny day outside. I apologize for sending you so many messages in the last couple of days, but I was doing some reflecting about our lecture yesterday in class, and I realized that I did not get as far as I wanted to get in our recruitment lecture, in part because we had such great discussion and a lot of great questions were asked about previous material. So I absolutely love your questions. I love that you're engaged in the content, but I do want to make sure that we stay on track, especially with the upcoming chapters that we have. I want to make sure I have enough time to get through some concepts that might be a little bit newer to you all. And I think recruitment lends itself to self-study more so than some of our other topics. So I'm going to go through the recruitment slides that we did not cover yesterday, so you can follow along just like you would in class. You can also read your textbook, which I would recommend, and that'll allow you to digest the information in two ways. And this information can help you as you work on your assignment that's due this weekend. If you have any questions at all, let me know. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. And you should now be able to see the PowerPoint slides. So these are, this is exactly where we left off in class yesterday. So we started to talk about how we're going to get people to know or how we're going to target our applicant pool. And so once we've established who we're targeting, we need to create our recruitment message. So in general, organizations need to identify what type of message they want to send to job applicants, and they also need to balance the type of information that they share with applicants. So it's sort of this conundrum where an organization is trying to attract job applicants and they want to share all the good information about their organization with those applicants. But we need to be careful that the image we're portraying of our organization actually aligns with reality. So it's this balance of giving truthful information, but also making sure that we're telling applicants truthful information about our workplace. And this truthful information is especially important because research has shown that if the information that's provided during recruitment does not align with the actual job, once somebody is in that job, then they're likely to leave the organization. And this makes sense. In some of your first essays related to recruitment experiences, you shared with me some instances where what you were told you would be doing, say in an internship, was not actually what you ended up doing, and you didn't like those experiences, and as a result, probably wouldn't want to continue working on at that organization. So it's really important that we portray information that is realistic. So this is the role of a realistic job preview, or what we would call an RJP. With an RJP, applicants are provided honest information about the positives and negatives of the job. So we're not just sugarcoating what it's like to work at our organization. We're also giving you a realistic understanding of what you can expect in terms of time pressure or in terms of stressors or just the workplace environment. Giving applicants negative information might seem sort of counterintuitive to what we're trying to do in terms of we're trying to recruit you. But research has again shown that negative realistic information is perceived as more credible by applicants when compared to positive information. So if you're willing to share negative information, applicants tend to perceive that that is more realistic and more honest and take that into a stronger amount of consideration compared to just positive information. But you don't want to just air all of your organization's dirty laundry, so to speak. You have to be careful about the kinds of negative information that you're portraying. And in addition, you don't want to just give all negative information. So some ways that you can offset the effects of negative information is by explaining the meaningfulness of the job. If you can help a job applicant understand how this job provides meaning, then they're more likely to be attracted to the job even if there are some downsides. So maybe you explain, oh, we have some really demanding clients, and that can be a challenge. but our work is really important in helping to reach those clients' needs, and we make a big difference in their world. So you can sort of offset some of the negatives by helping an applicant to see how that job can be meaningful to customers or to society at large. So we also have to identify what kind of information we're going to share. So as we shape that recruiting message, we need to ask ourselves, what type of information should I share? And how much of this information should I share with applicants? So over time, research has suggested that in general, the more information you share, the better. So if you can provide more details, that's good. But you also want to make sure that the information is relevant to the job. If an organization fails to provide key information that would be important to a job applicant, the applicant can have negative perceptions of the firm and likely won't want to apply. So failing to provide information about pay, about location, or career development opportunities may lead an applicant to perceive the firm in bad light, or think perhaps they're not being forthcoming, and then they won't want to apply. So the information that you do share with your job applicants should be specific to the job and explaining what the job entails, what skills and abilities are required, what the pay is, what the hours are. You're really trying to give an honest overview of what the job entails. But you have to balance this. So you don't want to spray them with a water hose, so to speak. You want to make sure that the information isn't overwhelming. And this is especially important when we're looking at differences between men and women in terms of applying for jobs. So women have been shown to screen themselves out from the recruitment process or from the application process if they don't meet all of the requirements that are listed on the job description. So if you list 20 WRCs that are required for the job, women are going to be less likely to apply for that job if they don't have all 20 WRCs. On the other hand, men have been shown to be more confident or more risk-taking in that they apply for jobs even when they don't meet all of the criteria. So to protect against or prevent individuals from self-selecting out, even when they might be qualified for the job, we can take certain precautions. So even though we want to provide good information about the job, we should avoid long-winded descriptions. So you don't need to explain what the day will be like minute by minute. That might be too much for the applicant. You also want to avoid industry jargon. So you don't want to use acronyms or words that might not be familiar to all individuals who are applying. And you really want to focus on those key WRCs and experiences. So rather than listing 20 WRCs, can you list 5 WRCs that are really essential to the job? And then you'll be more likely to have applicants that then choose to apply for the job if they feel like they meet all 5 of those, rather than trying to meet a list of 20. And then as the recruitment process is now moving online, it's important to consider how information is portrayed. So organizations need to maintain their websites, they need to maintain their social media, whatever online platforms they're using to recruit applicants, they need to make sure that they're technologically advanced and that they're user-friendly. If an individual goes to your website and they can't find where to apply, or the information is very clunky, or the system seems to be old or confusing, they're going to be less likely to apply for that position. So you have to make sure that the platform itself is user-friendly. So once you create your message and you figure out what you're going to say and how you're going to say it, then an organization needs to choose a method for distributing that information. So when we talk about recruitment methods, we're talking about possible avenues for reaching potential job candidates. Where will we go to find them? So there are 4 broad methods that an organization can use, and then within each of those broad methods are more specific outlets that we'll talk about. So the first type of recruitment method is advertisement, and this is probably one that you are familiar with. It's pretty common among organizations. Advertisements simply mean you're taking out an ad in some type of distribution or some type of outlet in order to reach candidates that might be interested in your job. So job advertisements can include local and national newspapers, television or radio, or even trade magazines. So if you're part of a specific industry, oftentimes those industries will have magazines that get sent out to other people in that industry. So you might try to recruit an engineer by putting a job ad in an engineering magazine. It gets sent out across America to different engineers, and that can help raise awareness of a job. So the textbook will identify whether or not certain types of recruitment methods should be used for professional jobs or non-professional jobs. And generally speaking, you would use local sources such as your local newspaper or local radio station for non-professional jobs. And then when trying to reach professional jobs, CEOs, vice presidents, highly skilled jobs, you might need to expand your reach for more of those national or statewide outlets. So in addition to advertisements, we can also partner with agencies and organizations to try to reach job applicants through those other outlets. This is where we would see targeted minority recruitment occurring. So if you remember from yesterday, we talked about ways in which we can try to target a certain demographic group in order to increase diversity among our applicant pool. So here we might be able to partner with certain organizations or community organizers in order to reach our targeted population. Organizations can also partner with employment agencies and search firms. So with employment agencies, organizations contract out some of their hiring process. This is quite common with jobs that are more low skilled or lower paying. For example, cleaning services might contract with an employment agency so that that employment agency screens and does all the hiring process for those individuals who want to apply for the job. Search firms, on the other hand, tend to be used for jobs that are higher in status or perhaps might be more important in the organization. So you would hire a search firm in order to find the applicants that you're trying to reach. This is very similar to a headhunter type of method. Can also recruit through universities and colleges. This is a great way to meet young professionals who are just starting out in their careers, who have very fresh knowledge of the industry. And you all are very familiar with this method as you've probably attended events here on campus that have put you in touch with different organizations that are hiring. And then lastly, organizations can attend job fairs in which they try to reach job applicants who are currently looking for a job, who go to the job fair and get to peruse multiple employers. The next way that organizations can recruit are through professional associations. So these professional associations are groups that individuals within a certain industry might join. So you might think of the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM, as a professional association. In my own experience, I'm part of the Society for Industrial Organizational Psychologists, and it's quite common for firms that want to hire IO psychologists to go to the PSYOP conference in order to reach IO professionals. So we can recruit through those professional conferences or through professional organizations. Perhaps we can list an advertisement on their website, or perhaps we can have them send out an email of our job description on our behalf. And then lastly, the organization can also look inside of its entity and say, hey, what resources might we have inside our organization that we could use to recruit individuals? This might sound sort of counterintuitive, but an organization might actually reach out to previous employees, perhaps individuals who were good employees but moved on for different opportunities, perhaps didn't have an opportunity for advancement at the time and ended up leaving the organization, and now they think they could be a good fit if they have an opening. Might also rely on employee referrals. So you ask your employees, do you know somebody that might be able to fill this job? Or do you know someone that would be interested in working for our organization? You could also ask your current employees. Perhaps you have a job opening and some of your current employees might be a good fit. If this could be a lateral move where they simply change jobs but don't necessarily change status, or it could be a promotion where they end up filling a managerial position with an individual who currently works for your organization. And then lastly, an organization has control over its own website, and they can use this to try to attract job applicants. So you can place job openings on your website. You could have a whole website dedicated to job applicants or what it would be like to work at your organization. And this, of course, all that content would be under control of the organization. And then lastly, this might apply to some of you, organizations can also leverage internships in order to have an employee get acclimated to the organization as an intern and then offer them a position whereby they would stay on as a full-time employee after the internship has ended. So this is a good way to test out a future employee to see how they work or how they fit with the organization. And then if fit and performance are good, then you can offer them the opportunity to stay on with the organization. So part of an organization's strategy for recruitment is going to be determining which methods to use. So it's unlikely that an organization would use every single method that was listed on the previous slide. That would be very time consuming, also very wasteful in terms of resources because some of those methods are quite expensive. So there are certain considerations that an organization needs to make when deciding upon its recruitment methods. They need to consider the cost. They need to consider how fast they can get applicants. They need to consider how much information are they able to share via certain outlets. On your own website, you can share unlimited information, but on a television ad, you're quite limited to the amount of time you would have. They also need to consider the number of applicants that they might be able to reach through a particular method, as well as identifying if they want to have an internal or an external recruitment method. Whichever method an organization chooses, the most important thing is that these methods need to be specific to the job in which you are hiring. So you will not use the same method or methods for all jobs. And instead, organizations need to evaluate which methods are going to be most helpful for reaching the job candidates that we need right now, the job candidates that we need for this particular job. So the ways in which Starbucks recruits baristas will be very different from the way that Starbucks recruits regional sales managers. So now we're going to break down these considerations into more detail, just identifying which methods might be more costly or less costly, which might be quicker or slower. This is again represented, I believe it's table 5.1 in your textbook, where it compares all of the different methods on each of these different dimensions. And that table will be helpful for you as you work through your written assignment due on Sunday. So again, organizations need to consider cost. Some methods are going to be much more expensive than others. In general, those methods that are expensive are those that involve travel or personnel time. Anytime you have to send somebody and pay for them to travel to a college or a university or to a job fair, they have to spend the night, you have to pay them to eat, it can add up. And any of those methods that involve large amounts of personnel time. So again, if you're sending a recruiter to different job fairs or different events, that takes up a lot of time and therefore can be quite expensive. Certain methods that are inexpensive are employee referrals. It costs your organization almost nothing to ask your current employees, hey, do you know someone who would want to work in this job? Pretty cost effective. Local advertising often tends to be much more inexpensive compared to national advertising efforts. So, local radio, local newspaper, those tend to be pretty affordable for organizations. Again, some methods are going to be slower or faster than others, and generally, those methods that are going to be slower involve recruiting from colleges. Again, you have to go to different locations. Oftentimes, you're recruiting far in advance. You all know if you went to the job fair last fall, there are organizations there in September, October, November recruiting individuals who might not graduate until May. So oftentimes you're trying to reach connections with individuals who might not be ready to work for you for several months or even in some cases more than a year. Also, using search firms can be quite time consuming because you are not necessarily the one in control of the search process. And oftentimes, you might be trying to reach a very small population or a very specific population. If you're searching for an executive or for a general manager, that can take much more time when the general applicant population is smaller. Some quick methods are, again, employee referrals. Pretty easy to ask people to refer a friend, and then turnaround tends to be quick. Also, word of mouth. This occurs more at the community at large. So if someone hears of a job opening and they tell you about it, that would be considered a word of mouth method. That also tends to have some pretty quick results. And reaching professional organizations can be a quick method. If you want to hire a human resource management person, you reach out to SHRM. That's going to help target your recruitment and will allow you to do more turnaround on the application process. And then lastly, websites and job boards, pretty quick. You can put up an advertisement online or on your website, and that tends to drive a lot of traffic and is pretty quick in terms of getting applicants to apply. We also need to evaluate how much information can be shared across methods. So generally, advertisements on TV, on the radio, in the newspaper, we don't get a lot of space in order to say everything we might want to say. So in some instances, you might be limited to saying your organization, the position, and some very brief requirements for that job. So you're not going to be able to give all the information you want. Also, job fairs, generally speaking, an applicant isn't getting all of the information that they might want. At a job fair, the recruiter's job is basically to drive interest in the position. Oftentimes, they refer individuals back to the website or to other resources so that the individual can learn more about the organization at a different time. And then agencies as well. If you contract with a recruitment agency or a staffing agency, you're often limited in the amount of information that is shared as the agency controls most of that information. There are some methods that offer more information. These would include the company website, internships, different job boards, and referrals. So with the company website, you can put up as much information as you desire. With internships, those interns are getting a lot of information about working for your organization. They have sort of an insider's view on the organization, and that provides them with more information than they might need in order to make a decision about wanting to work for the organization. Same with job boards. If you go to monster.com or Indeed, you can typically have a pretty long advertisement that would allow you to share all of the information you need to about the job. And then lastly, we need to consider the number of applicants that each method can draw in. So some methods are going to bring us more individuals than others. So those that tend to be inconsistent include advertisements and employment agencies. If you look in the textbook under the table, actually it seemed like most of the methods were pretty inconsistent. And that's because whether or not you draw upon applicants is going to be very dependent on a lot of the external factors in the environment. So how well the economy is doing will determine whether or not you get a lot of applicants. Is it on season or off season might determine how many applicants apply, what the perception of the organization is. So even if you use a method that's pretty reliable, if you have a poor organization image, you might not draw on as many applicants. So really the broad takeaway is that we're going to use multiple recruitment methods, but you need to tailor these to the specific jobs you're hiring for, depending on what the needs are. So how much time do you have to hire? How much money do you have to spend? How important is this job? And how important is it to get it right? Might be you might have more flexibility when you're hiring an entry-level position, but if you're going to hire an executive, you want to make sure you get it right the first time. So again, just some special considerations we might want to think of as we review different methods. And here, what we're going to focus on are differences between personal and formal methods. So generally speaking, those methods that are internal to the organization, such as word of mouth or referrals, those are what we consider more personal forms of recruitment. And research shows that applicants actually weigh information from personal sources more heavily than information from formal sources. So if someone tells you about a job, you're going to weigh whatever information they give you about that job more heavily than what you would see just on the advertisement or what you heard on the radio. Even more interesting, when employees were recruited through personal methods, so you heard about this job through your mom, or you heard about this job because your best friend works for that organization. When employees are recruited in this way, they actually are less likely to turn over. So they stick with the organization longer. And this effect lasted through the first 24 months of their employment. So the first 2 years that they were employed with the organization, those who were recruited through personal methods much less likely to leave compared to those that were recruited through formal methods. So if you're an organization that has turnover concerns, it might be in your best interest to use personal recruitment methods. Oftentimes, individuals recruit people they know that would do a good job for the organization. And other times, those new employees want to do a good job because they want to represent the person who referred them in a positive light. Research has also suggested that positive word of mouth information makes the organization more attractive to applicants. So if someone hears about a job and tells you, oh, I've heard it's really nice to work there, or I've heard that this organization pays really well, that information is going to help attract applicants. So again, it's important for the organization to create goodwill, to present a positive image within the community in which it works in order to attract applicants. So some of these word of mouth information might come through refer a friend programs. So there are certain organizations that will pay you if you refer someone. When I worked at Cracker Barrel, we got paid, I think it was $200 if we referred somebody and they got hired and they stayed for 6 months or more. So there's an incentive to refer people that you know are going to do a good job, because then you get money out of it as well. But one thing to pay attention to is that when we ask people to refer friends or to refer family members, this can lead to what we call similar to me bias. So essentially, similar to me bias says that as people, we like others that are similar to us, that share similar experiences. And so this may lead our close circles to be very homogenous. Essentially, that means that most of your friends might look like you or might share your same experiences that you share, and therefore are much less diverse. So if we ask our current employees to refer people that are in their networks, we might be referring people that share very similar attributes. So lots of young individuals, or lots of Caucasian individuals, or lots of women, right? And we want to make sure that we aren't relying solely on these word of mouth sources, because we do want to have some diversity in our applicant pool and in our organization. So in addition to comparing personal versus formal sources, we also need to consider internet-based methods. So it's really almost unheard of, I think, to recruit individuals for a job without using the internet. It just has drastically transformed how we can reach individuals and the number of individuals we can reach. But there are certain best practices that you should adhere on. First, it's important to rely on individuals who know your organization and who are familiar with the job when it comes time to referring applicants. So you might share information on Facebook with certain individuals or other organizations that are familiar with you, and then they can also help spread some goodwill about your organization. It's also helpful to develop a recruiting website. So, not simply having a link on your website that lists all of the open jobs, but an actual website dedicated to sharing information about the organization and what it's like to work in the organization. This is quite helpful for giving individuals a realistic glimpse into working for your workplace. It's also quite helpful to use employee testimonials. So have your current employees make videos or share snippets and anecdotes about what it's like to work for the organization or why they were attracted to the organization. That can help, again, help other people see that they might be a good fit for the job. Again, you can use a testimonial that's in written form, but researchers suggest that those testimonials that include video and audio are going to be much more effective simply than testimonials in print. In addition, organizations need to decide whether or not they're going to recruit active job seekers or passive job seekers. So active job seekers are those that are currently looking very actively to find another job, while passive applicants have a job, maybe aren't really interested in leaving or aren't actively pursuing positions, but if the right fit came along, they would be open to leaving their current organization. So if we're going to recruit active job seekers, we would want to target job boards, online job boards like Indeed, Monster, because this is where people go when they're searching for jobs, and they're doing so with intent of leaving their job for certain. If we want to recruit passive job seekers, those who might be interested in an opportunity if it came their way, we should consider different social media outlets. So LinkedIn, of course, has become the leader in trying to recruit talent. And this is a good way to post information about your organization that could pique the interest of someone who's perusing those social media outlets but isn't necessarily actively searching for a job. So whichever methods that we choose to use to recruit individuals, we need to make sure that we do not consciously or unconsciously discriminate during the recruitment process. That's going to be very important for protecting ourselves against possible lawsuits, and also important for helping us to develop and maintain a diverse applicant pool. So the first rule is that you would do not express a preference for a protected group characteristic in job advertisements. So you might say, who would do that? That seems silly. But it does happen, unfortunately, in certain instances where an organization indicates that they are interested in a certain group over another. For example, this is an example of Facebook ad that was used to target men exclusively. And so it said, we're interested in hiring people for construction. There may be reasons you're seeing this, such as you're a man aged 25 to 45 who live near this area. So here they're really targeting only one group of individuals, which are men. And this would not be in an effort to increase diversity, because we know that in the construction industry, it tends to be pretty male dominated. In other countries, there have been instances in which advertisements would say men only or women should not apply. That type of language would, of course, be illegal here in the United States. But again, we want to be careful that we don't craft our language such that we're excluding individuals. If you're contracting with an employment agency, a staffing agency, or a search firm, those agencies cannot honor any request to avoid referring applicants in a protected group. So you cannot hire XYZ staffing and say, we only want to hire women. or we only want to hire individuals who are between the ages of 20 and 30. That would be putting yourself into jeopardy, can also put the employment agency into jeopardy, and both can be held liable. So you don't want to have any preferences for certain groups. Again, to help prevent some of that similar to me bias, you do not want to exclusively use word of mouth sources. So again, these referral programs are helpful for generating potential job applicants, but they shouldn't be the only source that you use, because we might end up basically duplicating the applicant pool that we currently have, or replicating the makeup of our organization. So if it's not currently diverse, it's not likely to get more diverse by using word of mouth sources only. And again, we should recruit from diverse sources to increase diversity among the applicant pool. So if you really want to have a range of ages, if you want to be inclusive to both men and women, you might need to use different sources in order to reach them. And at the end of the day, you're going to be better off if you have a more diverse applicant pool, because you're going to end up then with more diverse hires, and it's good for the organization in the long run. Okay, so we had previously talked about our applicant population and how that applicant population gets whittled down to the applicant pool. And the applicant pool includes all of those individuals who have applied for the job. Once we, as an organization, evaluate all of those applications, we are going to select individuals who are sort of at the top of the list, and these become our job candidates. So here we're talking about a subset of the applicant pool that meet the job qualifications. So you'll look through the applications and say, do you have 4 years of experience? Do you have a degree in marketing? If yes, okay, we're going to consider you for the next stages. So once you have an applicant pool and you've narrowed down those people who meet the job qualifications, the task for the organization is no longer to attract people to apply, but to keep that interest among applicants after they've applied. You don't want them to now drop out of the process if you know that they are required. So in order to maintain applicant interest, it's important that the recruiters are an effective administrator of the process. Are they following the rules? Are they friendly? Are they making good connections with applicants and making good impressions on those applicants? It's also important to utilize two-way communication. If you've ever applied for a job and have gone months or weeks without hearing any information from the organization, you know how anxiety-producing that might be and how frustrating it can feel if you don't have any information or really any power in the process. So it's really important to utilize two-way communication to keep your job applicants aware of where you're at in the process. That way, people who are qualified for the job don't end up dropping out or trying to find other opportunities because your organization isn't sharing information with them. And again, it's important to now transition into really ramping up the information you share. That would allow people to make judgments about their person-job fit and person-organization fit. Remember that PO fit is going to become even more important as we get closer to the hiring decision. So in terms of maintaining applicant attraction, there are certain factors that we need to consider. And the first is that role of person-job fit. So we talked about how person-job fit was important for attracting people to an actual opening, but it's also going to be important for maintaining their interest throughout the application process. So this person-job fit is going to become more important as an individual progresses through the hiring process. If they perceive that they are not a good fit for the job, then they're likely to bow out of the recruitment stage. So poor fit leads to withdrawal from the process. So we want to help applicants see how they might be a good fit for the job. We want to, in some ways, convince them that they could be a good fit for the position. Allowing them to see that fit will maintain their interest. There are also organizational factors that contribute to maintaining applicant attraction. Factors like pay, benefits, growth, and the available labor market are going to influence whether or not applicants keep attraction in our organization. So If your organization does not pay a lot of money, once an applicant knows that, they might decide that they don't want to continue on in the process. Or perhaps they feel like they're a good fit for the job, but there really isn't any growth potential. Not much you can do about that in terms of a recruitment stance, but these factors will influence whether or not somebody chooses to continue on in the application process. And then lastly, individuals are going to evaluate how fair they perceive the process to be. So you might think back to your own experiences that you wrote about in your selection experience essay. And I asked you, how fair did you think the process was? Your applicants are also going to ask themselves these questions. Is the process fair? And there are three specific types of fairness that they're going to consider. The first is procedural justice. So this has to deal with the actual process. Did you have to engage in the same methods or go through the same hurdles as everyone? Did the organization use a fair process to evaluate your qualifications? Also, we're going to evaluate informational justice. So this is how much information the organization shares. Do you perceive that they gave you honest information, or do you feel like the organization was trying to hide information from you, or perhaps was trying to play up the benefits of the job when they aren't really benefits of the job? So how much information did the organization share, and do you think this was honest information? And then lastly, applicants are going to consider interpersonal justice, and this involves how they feel they were treated. So were you kind to them? Were you nice? Did they feel as though they were respected? If an individual shows up for a job interview and you are 15, 20 minutes late, they might perceive that you don't respect them or care about their time, and that might make them feel as though the process wasn't really fair, and they don't want to remain part of the applicant population. So we have to consider, are we using the same methods for everyone? Are we giving honest, open information? Are we treating people well? If yes to all of those things, then the perceived fairness of the process is likely to be much higher. So again, in this stage, as we have narrowed down to specific job candidates, we're shifting away from trying to bring people into the organization, and we're now trying to strategize about how to keep them interested, how to create these quality social exchanges. Remember, recruitment isn't just about getting applicants attracted, but also you have to sell the applicant on your organization. So it is a balance. As I mentioned, that recruiters' expertise and the ways in which they administer the selection process or the recruitment process is going to be very important. So there's certain recruiter characteristics we want to pay attention to. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly because they're pretty self-explanatory, but just to tell you that I said them. We know that recruiters influence an individual's decision to apply, but they end up having less influence on decisions to accept the job offers. So if you go to a job fair at Salisbury University and you have a really great interaction with a recruiter, you're probably going to be more likely to apply for that job. Later on in the process, when it comes time to accept the job, you're likely not going to be focused on who the recruiter was or your interaction with them. On the same side, if you go to the job fair and a recruiter is rude or they're on their phone or you feel as though they're not really listening to you, that's probably going to influence your decision. And in this instance, you might decide not to apply to the organization because you didn't have a good interaction. In general, if we look at recruiters versus looking at characteristics of the job and the organization, we see that those job factors, those organization factors are going to more strongly influence recruits as compared to recruiters. So recruiters do influence your decision to apply, but not quite as much as those job factors or those organization factors. So consider that you have a really great interaction with a recruiter and you like them and they're nice, but you don't really have a good person job fit, you probably aren't likely to apply. Because recruiters are charged with trying to get individuals attracted to the organization and interested in a job, we know that recruiters are seen as less credible and trustworthy than members of the work group. So the information a recruiter tells you, you might not take it to heart, right? You take it with a grain of salt, as compared to information that a current employee tells you, you might be more likely to see that as credible. And of course, it's important for your recruiter to have characteristics that are going to be perceived positively. So being personable, being informed about the organization, demonstrating competence and concern. All of those would be characteristics that we would want in a recruiter. Somebody that's very introverted or seems to know nothing about the organization would not necessarily do a good job trying to sell it to potential job applicants. Okay, so once we narrow down our applicant, our job candidates, we now need to decide who we are going to hire. So hires are a subset of job candidates who will receive job offers. So remember, the job candidates are all individuals who applied and met the qualifications. Then we might have them go through some other recruitment steps or some other selection screens, like an interview or a situational judgment test. And from those job candidates, we now select people that we want to hire. At this stage, the responsibilities shift to the applicant. So our recruitment process is sort of dwindling down and more of the power now shifts to the applicant. Because we've made job offers, we want those people to be with our organization. They're the ones we've picked. But now the choice really comes down to the applicant to decide if they want to be part of the organization. So the applicant is likely to look back at all the information they've obtained throughout the process, and that's going to influence their decision to either accept the job or not accept the job. Those experiences, those interactions during the recruitment process are also going to influence the decision. So did the employee or did the applicant have a good interview? Did they feel as though their interactions were positive? Did they feel as though any of their visits or interviews were well organized and well planned? All of those factors are going to be important. It's kind of interesting. This slide here is going to show an overview of how certain factors shape our perceptions of job offer acceptance. And this study is actually based on perceptions from undergraduate students. So essentially what happened is a team of researchers asked undergraduate students at the beginning of a recruitment process what factors they thought would be important for choosing a job. So imagine I say to all of you, hey, you want to choose a job, what would make you actually take the job? So at that time, at the beginning of the recruitment process, these students indicated that compensation would be really important, or culture would next be important, then the work itself, and then benefits tied with the work itself. So those would be the things that would influence whether or not they would accept a job offer. But after these students went through the recruitment process and went through the application process and had received an offer, it was found that those factors that actually shaped their job choice had changed. So now that you have an offer, we ask you, which factors are most important in choosing to accept or decline that offer? And by and large, the most important factor became treatment by the organization. How you were treated during the whole process is most important, followed by how well did your on-site visit go. Work itself and culture then seem to become less important, and the least important becomes compensation. So this treatment, those perceptions of fairness, all of that is going to be so much more important for helping influence someone to decide to work for your organization. So after they accept the offer, then hooray, your selection process is done and recruitment is officially over. But remember that recruitment is more than just getting individuals to apply. It occurs throughout the entire hiring process. So just because people have applied to your organization does not mean they're definitely going to work there. It doesn't mean that you don't still have to woo them. It is a balance where you're trying to essentially sell each other that the organization is a good fit for the individual and the individual is a good fit for the organization. Okay, so here's our last step. and our last slide. So after we have carried out our recruitment plan, we need to evaluate if our recruitment process worked. Was it successful? For your final group project, you are going to have to identify what methods you're going to use to recruit for your job. And then you're going to have to identify metrics that you will use to determine if that recruitment is successful. So these 6 options will be those that you choose from for determining if your process was successful. So the first metric that we can use is new employee job performance. So here we evaluate all of our new employees in terms of job performance at 6 or 12 months after being hired. And we say, okay, on average, how are we doing? Are our employees, are they performing well? If they're not performing well, then maybe we need to be recruiting from different sources, or maybe we need to be reaching a different audience. We can also look at new employee turnover. So this is looking at the number or percentage of employees who leave the organization after 6 or 12 months voluntarily. So again, these would be individuals who maybe perceive poor person job fit or poor person organization fit after they've joined the organization. Again, this is super costly for organizations. So if a lot of employees are voluntarily leaving after a short amount of time, maybe you need to go back and evaluate your recruitment process. Maybe you need to evaluate your recruitment messages. And are you really giving a realistic job preview to applicants? You can also look at new hire failure rates. So this involves the percentage of employees who are fired. So with turnover, these are employees who left on their own accord. Firing are employees that we have asked to leave our organization. So if you have a high percentage of people being fired, again, maybe we're not being realistic. Maybe we're not recruiting from the sources that we want to be recruiting from. Can also evaluate manager satisfaction with employees. So this simply involves going back to the managers who oversee new employees and asking, how satisfied are you with those employees? So not just that they're staying in the organization, but are the managers happy with the progress that they're making? Organizations can also evaluate new employee training success. So we can look at those training measures, such as different performance tests, and see if the individuals that we're bringing into the organization are actually completing our training methods or the training courses properly, and that they're doing well. And if they're doing well, then our recruitment process is working. If our employees aren't doing well during training, maybe it tells us we aren't recruiting the right type of individuals, or we need to be more explicit in the certain WRCs that we're hiring for. And then we would need to communicate that information through our recruitment messages. And then lastly, we can look at how much it costs us per person. So if we look at all of our expenses that we paid and then divide that by the number of people we've hired, how much is it costing us internally or externally per employee that we hire? And in some cases, we might say, wow, this is really expensive, and we don't want it to be that expensive. Or maybe we're getting great quality employees and the cost per hire is quite low. And so we have confidence in the system that we're using. So again, you would use any of these 6 metrics, probably not all of them, to evaluate how the recruitment process, how successful it was. Okay, so that is the end of the slideshow. I'm going to show you my face again. Hi, hello. That gets you through recruitment. Again, the recruitment chapter was kind of long. I hope that the PowerPoint condensed all of that information. Go through the slides. If you have any questions about recruitment, be sure to write them down, and we'll cover your questions about recruitment on Monday. We will not cover these PowerPoint slides again in class, but if you have questions, I'll be happy to go over that information or provide more examples for you. Now I feel more confident you have all the information that you need to complete your assignment this weekend. And on Monday, we can move into talking about reliability, which gives us some more time to work through some of these newer concepts. Okay, I hope you have a great weekend. If there's anything I can do for you, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. All right, guys, take care. Bye.